So an infographic, I just compiled some of the data from our various fuels reduction programs that the county funds, your taxpayer dollar funds, into this infographic. And so just a snapshot of what's been occurring. But I was prompted before coming today to talk to you all about the increased danger of wildfire in our community. And I know this was somewhat precipitated by a question that was put forward to this group at a previous meeting, and it was a matter of evacuation. And are we as first responders or the government prepared to help you all help yourselves? And we are. But wildfire is a little bit different than a tornado, for instance, or a hurricane. I'm from the West Coast, and so there are tsunami warnings. And along the coast, there are tsunami signage, and it says, get to higher ground. That's easy, because tsunamis come in and they work their way inland. And it's pretty well expected where the water would be coming from and where it would be heading. In a wildfire, it's all situational. And so for us to lay out an evacuation plan for you all, we find it might be a little bit confusing, and Chief Barino may get into that a little bit later, but we do have plans, and it's all to be deployed to you for your internal processing at time of incident. So if it's blowing left, you shouldn't go into it, right? So we don't want to tell you that's your way out beforehand. Ultimately, the prompt, are we ever really prepared for wildfire? Is this sharp enough? Super. I am going to propose a number of things here today. Conversationally, this is a bit of a story, but I do know that we have fuels and fire scientists in the room, social scientists in the room, community specialists, and so we all bring a great deal of knowledge to the table. For me, this is just a piece of what we all can share with one another to help us be more prepared for wildfire. So here I am, and here we go. I like to think of this situation that we all live in. We chose to move to a forested environment. We've built community here, and we really enjoy everything that this place has to offer. But if we keep in mind these environmental factors that are occurring around us at all times, us being, we're included as well, we can start to get a better picture of how we interact with the environment, the forests, how weather plays a part in all of this, and what we can do to be safer or more prepared in the event of a wildfire. So ultimately, I'd like to start off with the weather prompt. So what does it look like when we look out the window today? I see it's partly cloudy, it's cold, so temperature is in the low Fahrenheit, maybe single digits today. There's a white blanket on the ground, indicative of winter. And I might say, because there's white everywhere, we've got a great deal of precipitation on the landscape, and the environment, natural sciences are just in great shape. That's weather, that's today. That's what's going on outside the window today. But when we think about climate, and that's a big part of the beginning of this story, and drought, this is an occurrence. Atmospheric conditions are occurring over time. And so that's not a snapshot of what's occurring out your window, but it's this over time. And so I'm going to show you some maps that are about 15 years worth of time to convey this idea that we're in a drought. Even though it's great ski season right now, we've got a lot of white on the ground outside, this is 1 month ago. These maps are University of Lincoln, Nebraska, droughtmonitor.edu, research-based information. CSU plays a part in finding this data. And we all know where Colorado is, this rectangle in the somewhat center west of our continent. And how are we looking today as far as precipitation goes? Are we getting enough precipitation? Are we somewhat okay, or are we in a deficit? Anyone want to show me what's happening here? Thank you for showing me. We are in a deficit in Colorado. In fact, throughout the entire West, right now, even though it's a good snow season, we are lacking. Now, the white on the map is the average precipitation has been achieved. Oh, also, I like to point out that in Colorado, the Colorado River, if we're looking at river systems, we have a couple of major blue arteries, one cutting through Colorado. This is the Colorado River. And so where are we? Where is Summit County? It's really just slightly south of the northeasternmost terminus, or the start point of the Colorado River. And that would be in Kremling, or thereabouts, Grand County. So a year ago, if you notice the map date, good, equivalent, not so good, we can all see that we are in a 2-year drought. Still kind of on the weather story. but we're starting to head towards a climate phenomenon. Now, these are snapshots. That's January 17th. That's just a day or a week in a 52-week year. So in 2017, the the east slope, east of the Continental Divide, is not receiving enough precipitation. The west slope is in this snapshot. And 2016, maps change. All of the data tables are on this one as well. But 16 somewhat similar. Colorado received enough precipitation in January, at least average that year. But the west, the northwest, all of the west remains in a deep, deep drought. And I'm jumping backwards in time to try to build this story. Colorado, once again, dry. 14, dry. And we're jumping 10 years back from there. Super dry. So since 2014 to 2019, this 15-year progression, we can come to understand or accept that we have not been receiving the average amount of precipitation in any given January for the last 15 years. That's telling us more of a climate story. Climatologically, we are aridifying. The West is getting drier. So drought has this implication that we're going to come out of drought, and we haven't come out of drought. And so this has something to do with vegetation and the amount of moisture on our landscape, and how that translates to humans in the forested environment and the wildfire conversation. So there's another component here that is disturbance. So we have this atmospheric, abiotic, non-living situation occurring, and now we have this biotic situation where insects play a great important role in nature. All of the larvae that these insects produce, mountain pine beetle comes up with about 70 eggs from each female every year. That's an incredible food source for birds. So I've heard people say how terrible or devastating this is, that insect pests are changing our forested landscape, but not devastating, not terrible, part of the natural system. Also, these insects kill old trees. If we throw ourselves back 100 years, humans modified the landscape when they first came across the continent, building society. We had trappers, miners. Eventually, all of this influx of people were modifying the landscape, cutting down trees. The same period of time, about 100 years ago, the Roosevelt administration enacted public policy, federal policy, to suppress wildfire. So we removed a very important natural force that would have helped keep our forests balanced and healthy. Mountain pine beetle kills old trees. They've all been growing for about 100 years. They're all old. So they have an impact on our environment as well. We also know that spruce beetle, western balsam bark beetles, Douglas fir beetles are all naturally occurring native insect pests that fulfill their life cycle in the coniferous forests of North America, Canada to Mexico. And well, I'm going to show a progression of slides that many of you have seen before, but this is just a reminder telling the story of where we've come from and what the situation is today. Summit County, I often like to share with people that you can always find us on any given map if you can find the interstate, Denver, coming all the way across to Grand Junction, and there is a prominent V shape right in the middle of the state of Colorado, but that V is Summit County. The top right corner is about Silverthorne, the top left corner is about East Vale, the bottom is Copper or Breckenridge, depending on which side of the mountains you're on. So I'm just going to fly through these. Mountain pine beetle on the landscape over time, naturally occurring insect pest, killing old trees, feeding birds, and changing our forested environment. So that was hard for us to accept, and we've come around to the place where we do accept. So now I'm jumping to 2012, whole state perspective on purpose to share that spruce beetle, pine beetle, we have a number of different kinds of insect pests within and surrounding Summit County continue to be active on the landscape because that's what they do. 2014, now I'm coming forward in time, the climate maps we went backward, a great deal of insect activity is occurring in our forests throughout Colorado, and this is actually a small snapshot of the continent. This is occurring up into Canada and across the west into the Sierra as well. Good, bad. If I ask you to put on your science goggles, you'd kind of understand that this is just nature finding balance. Everything is dynamic, everything is on the go, and we can understand that it's not going to just settle down and become a static situation. Nature's seeking equilibrium. And that's how we have temperature fluctuations and wind. And so beetle may end up calming down quite a bit if we end up having a more age class or species class diverse forest in the future. But for today, this is what we're still looking at. Bottom right is the date on this map, January of 2019, taking us back to the present. Dan West is our state entomologist with the Colorado State Forest Service, and he shared with me that we're concerned over here with the Douglas fir beetle potentially making its way over the mountains into Summit County. South of us in Park County, our spruce beetle activity, quite a bit of activity. Summit County currently doesn't have a whole lot of insect activity. A little bit is noted in the south end of the county, and that's where we see our insect threat currently. But if we take a glance around the state, insects are still doing their thing. So there's a snapshot on disturbance. Let's jump into some fire. Fire is good for nature. We know it's good for nature. It cleans out the understory. It may take out weak trees, sickened trees, diseased trees, little, young trees. And ultimately, we know that trees require three major things to live: sunlight, nutrients from the soil, and water. And in our very high-density lodgepole pine forests, they've all been competing with one another for the majority of their lives. We haven't been logging the intercontinental West for this 100-year period of time as well. This is our national heritage, the Colorado Rockies. So we've left nature alone, and it's grown up incredibly dense. And all of these 100-year-old trees are quite small, quite skinny in diameter, in fact. So they're stressed, and they've been struggling their entire lives. This water resource, we live in a very arid environment, it's not readily available. And so it's been lacking. Fire in a high-density forest could help with this equilibrium conversation. We can find some balance if we have this disturbance. Once again, disturbance is kind of the name of the game here today. Of course, these days we've got civilization, we have people in the forested environments. We're always going to deploy firefighters to a fire, but we may very well let things burn these days. So when we don't manage the forests, we end up with a shot like this. And a jackstraw forest is where the trees have lost their grip on the soil. They're no longer living, and so they're no longer drawing anything up, and they are subject to wind throw, other environmental factors, and they end up falling down and becoming incredibly hazardous. And we have fire. And in a hazardous forest that's unraveling and coming apart and fire occurs, it can end up looking pretty devastating. This is after the Peak 2 fire in 2017. Fire crews went through with chainsaws and basically felled the hazard trees away from the trail so that our public recreation opportunity can still remain. And that leads us into us. So I wonder, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, did it make any noise? All of this has really everything to do with us. If people aren't here, nature would go on. And because we are here, this is what makes all of this conversation worth discussing. And this leads to that initial prompt. Is the county ready to help the citizens behave appropriately when we have an emergency? And I would like to propose that situational awareness is your responsibility. We all know where we live, but we need to internalize that. We know how we get home every day, but have we thought about the other routes? We all have our blinders, and we go about our normal daily tasks, but can we see the bigger picture of community, more than just me and the world revolving around? So if we accept that we're going to own some of this situational awareness moving forward, we start to look at where we live. Does anyone see a house anywhere within the vegetation? So this house, wherever it exists, it's in Summit County, may not survive a wildfire, especially if the wind is blowing from the audience toward. So we have a grassy environment here. We know fires tend to start small, and then with wind, they have the opportunity to grow, especially if we have a ladder situation where fire can climb higher, and if the fire were to get into the tops of these trees, it would overcome that building. So what we do in the fire prevention end of things here in Summit County is talk with homeowners about ways they can modify the environment around their structure to not only protect their structure but protect their neighbors. And conversely, if there was a fire within this home, it could start the forest on fire. So we could have something resonating from the building as well as from the forest. So this two-way street is something that we need to keep in mind when we talk about defensible space. Another actionable, and that's where I'm heading right now in this part of the presentation, is we now have a great understanding or a better understanding of where we've come from. We understand the atmospheric conditions that are playing a role in how the landscape looks. Our trees may show green, but they're not entirely wet. They're not producing a whole lot of sap. And disturbance everywhere we are leads us back to our own homes. And what can we do to protect ourselves? Here's an example of a defensible space that was put in place prior to a wildfire occurring. This is at the YMCA of the Rockies in Grand County. Snow Mountain Ranch. Structures survive. And this is a conflagration. I mean, this is a completely engulfing the forest fuel type. And defensible space shows that it works. It's the acceptance of pushing the forest back away from your structure. So a lot of this is this emotional connection as well. Are we prepared? Well, the county's prepared, the responders are prepared, but are you emotionally prepared? And that, I think, is an enormous part of all of this. A forested landscape where there was a blanket across the hillside is what we came to expect. And then a mechanical operation came through and created disturbance in lieu of wildfire, because we're going to continue to suppress wildfire, protect communities. But this is a good thing for forests. We're not only protecting community, creating a fuel break, but maybe an age class diversity can start to emerge. We can also plant seedling trees. Fifth graders and kindergartners at Dillon Valley Elementary School are planting little trees along the fence line, and this can help beautify and age diversify the forest. And we do indeed see that natural regeneration occurs after disturbance. So we might get a little concerned about clear cuts or small patch cuts or whatever it may be, this mosaic of forest disturbance, man-made disturbance, but the forest bounces back. Equilibrium, or this nature-seeking equilibrium, is always occurring. So I have a few questions. This is really a group discussion. Whether or not you want to share out is fine, but whether or not, you don't have to. But I'd really like people to internalize, what do you do if... Now we're past the ready, create defensible space, and the set, is your evacuation kit ready? You're being told to go. Oh, and you're at work, and you have living things at home. How do you emotionally accept that you're not going to be let back into your home because there's a wildfire pending? And how do you deal with the fact that you have pets or family members still at the residence that is subject potentially to burning down? Does anybody have a suggestion on what you might do ahead of time? This is back to planning. All this is situational awareness and getting yourselves ready well in advance of an issue. Yes, my dear.
Have a plan.
Okay, have a plan.
Yeah.
Just start there. My plan. The bullets can grow, and they can just keep on growing. If you call the animal control department, the shelter here in Summit County, they will then be informed that there's a pet at the residence, and they'll do what they can to retrieve the pet in your absence. I would like to propose that you also have the opportunity to let the animal control folks know that you have a pet at such and such address today. They keep a running list. And so when they know in advance the fire happens, the suggestion was that you can call them that day and let them know there's an animal there. What if the fire is so bad that the power lines are down, or there are so many calls coming into our system that the cell towers can't handle it? Now your intention to call the animal control to let them know your pet is there is unable to occur. But you can take care of that today. There's also a volunteer team, kind of a squad, that's ready to go with Summit County Animal Control in the event of a wildfire. Livestock, large animals like horses. The lower blue has a pretty robust, organized system to deal with livestock. But your cats and dogs, that's another story. And so let them know ahead of time. I often share with pretty much when I go talk to students in the school district that if you have a fish, they're going to be fine. So what do you do if you have only a very few minutes to leave. My colleague in Gilpin County calls it the bug out bag. She suggests you have the 1 hour bug out bag, the half an hour bug out bag. What's your 5-minute bag? Do you have any idea what you might grab? Because wouldn't it be silly if you showed up at the Red Cross shelter after having your neighborhood be evacuated and you look at what you grabbed and it was like a bag of chips and a chip clip? I mean, the point is the emotional state that we might find ourselves in could lead us to make irrational decisions. But if you have a situational awareness and a plan and you talk about it and you internalize it and it becomes somewhat rote, like the way you drive through the county, it just sort of occurs. This is why the firefighters train so much, so that they're expert at what they do when they need to do it. And no one's running around with their heads cut off like chickens. So you grab the most important things. And in the old days, we talked about your special paperwork. These days, I guess it's in a slide that's coming. I'll finish that thought. Upload everything to the cloud. You don't need to grab a single piece of paper anymore. Your files are totally secure, intact, and readily available if you take care of it today. Scan it all and just put it up in the internet. That way, wherever you end up finding your feet, you have proof of all of your information, everything you need to know. Do you wait to evacuate? Don't wait to evacuate. We have learned with fire scenarios in other parts of our country that those that didn't take the onus or didn't own the opportunity to leave when they thought they should and they would wait, terrible consequences occur. And so if you're concerned, you can call people, but you can also start loading up your car right then and there, and you can decide to go. There was a previous firefighter friend that talked to me about when her family's evacuation plan was really they were going to meet at the Brown Hotel in Denver. Because there's one, you can't confuse where you're headed, and maybe insurance will pay for it later, so you may as well make it a nice experience. So the discussion doesn't need to occur. Don't wait. How about this one? It's a little less about like a pending wildfire, and it's really about any situation. If your house is on fire, maybe the fire department can find it. You would think. But you need help. Can they find it? I drive around with the chipping program all over Summit County, and many homes have dark wood stained, and then they've got a dark brown number system on the dark wood stained part of the house. I'm trying to keep track of who's participating in chipping, and I cannot find the house number. Help us out. Make it reflective, non-combustive, and contrasting. So if it hasn't already occurred, take away these notes and go do something about it. Hopefully, what I prompted a minute ago, you know how to get in and out of your own community. And the plans, we talked about the plans. I just mentioned a pre-set meeting place. So I have a child at the middle school, a child at the high school. My wife works in Breckenridge Elementary School. So we're all over the county. Here I am in Frisco. We're splattered, and I imagine most families are once we wake up and leave our houses each day. So what are you going to do about that? Without freaking out because you can't find your kid. Because you're not going to freak out because you've already internalized the emotional states that you'll go through, and you're going to be ready to just work it out. Smooth sailing. So only a couple more questions here. My mother received some evacuees. I grew up in Napa, California, and so when the Sonoma County fires were occurring into Napa County a couple of years ago, a number of the friends I grew up with in high school, their families have lost their homes completely. So if that were to occur, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out. Worst case scenario. Have you thought about that? Do you have replacement value insurance? Or is it just assessed value? Because I know my assessed report is less than my replacement expense or its valuation, what I could sell it for. So that's something to keep in mind. There is a refreshing note that the friends my mother received for a few months. They lived with her. They no longer have to deal with all of those photo albums from Uncle Joe that somehow got put in their laps, and they were then the family steward of that story, and then they're going to pass it along to their kids. There was something that the wildfire, having consumed their home, it released them of a whole lot of burden. So I'm proposing a little silver lining here. It's not going to be fun, but are you planning for the potential? Do you have family in other places of the country? Are you on your own? Do you have a first month, last month opportunity to rent something? There are people in California after the campfire. They're still living in tents in the Walmart parking lot. And tiny house conversations are starting to happen to take care of homeless. On that note, I recently read a report that homelessness, the overriding factor, and Jamie, if I say this right or wrong, but what is the one single factor that they all have in common? It comes out that it's bad luck. Thank you for nodding. And then it becomes this cascading of effects. But your house being burned down could lead you to be in a situation that is not desirable. So, final slide, passing it over to Chief Barino. This is your responsibility. We talk a lot about this in Summit County. It's everyone's responsibility to take care of everyone. Drill it down to your own family and your own self. Do these things. Don't wait for the fire department, but when the sheriff does tell you to go, don't play around and hang out. Go ahead and go. And let the first responders do their job when a wildfire does indeed occur, which we can expect it. We know that the numbers can come out of the fire folks, but every year dozens of fires occur here in Summit County. Many, many are small. We never even hear about them. We do hear about the big ones, and we're starting to have at least a big one every year. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon.